The third section of my presentation is a selection of my personal hypotheses relating to Mallory's and Irvine's last climb. These are drawn from my book, Mallory, Irvine and Everest, The Last Step But One, and here I am presenting some of those which I think are well supported by objective evidence. My first hypothesis relates to Odell's location when he sighted Mallory and Irvine. Odell's early narratives related to climbing a little crag at 26,000 feet. He wrote that it was at the top of this crag that he made the sighting. It was implicit in these narratives that he could see both the first step and the second step, and by implication the third step, which at that time had no name. However, in relation to the timings that he gave, the altitude of 26,000 feet cannot be correct. Long story short, I believe that at the time of his sighting, Odell was at about 26,500 or 26,600 feet. This has consequences for what he could and could not see, to which I will now turn. My second hypothesis relates to what Odell could and could not see. On Google Earth, I identified 3 formations which I thought could be his little crag. I selected Crag A, drew paths from this point to the crests of the first, second, and third steps, and calculated the elevation profiles. I concluded that Odell could have seen the crest of the third step, but not the crests of the first or second steps, which were blocked by intervening terrain. My analysis echoed the doubts that Odell himself had expressed. I therefore advanced the hypothesis that Odell saw Mallory and Irvine climbing and surmounting the third step. My third hypothesis relates to Mallory's and Irvine's route. The hypothesis is necessarily based on circumstantial evidence drawn from Mallory's own statements. Mallory's statements convey that he did not contemplate a route along the crest of the northeast ridge, that he envisaged a fast assault on the summit, and that he would not waste time attempting difficult or extreme terrain. In fact, the word step does not appear once in all of his writings. I therefore advance the hypothesis that Mallory did not intend to climb and did not climb the second step. He and Irvine arrived at the third step by another route. I have a hypothesis for that route, which I can present on another occasion. My last hypothesis for today concerns the fate of Andrew Irvine. There have been several sightings of deceased European climbers who might be Irvine. Of these, I believe that the most credible and the most authoritative is that of Wang Fuzhou. On May 24, 1960, Wang was a member of the Chinese team that was tasked to reach the summit. It is documented that at a minimum they reached the third step. In 1965, Wang told a Soviet audience that at 8,600 meters he had seen the body of a European. The deceased climber was wearing suspenders or braces. That climber could not be Mallory. The only remaining possibilities are that it was Irvine, who was once photographed wearing suspenders, or if not Irvine, a member of a Soviet expedition of 1952, on which only press reports exist. The second part of this hypothesis is that if Irvine was indeed sighted by Wang Fuzhou, his body subsequently fell to the central Rongbuk Glacier, that is, after 1960. Again, the evidence is necessarily circumstantial. Since 1960, hundreds of climbers have traversed between the second step and the third step. None ever reported sighting the body of a pre-war climber. If we accept Wang's account of a sighting at 8,600 meters, that location is above the top of the northern couloir, and from there it is an uninterrupted trajectory to the head of the glacier. In 2024, somewhere on the glacier, at an unknown distance from the mountain, Irvine's boot and his partial remains were found. The fourth and last part of my presentation relates to Irvine's journey on the glacier. Here I must make the disclaimer that I am not a glaciologist. In the few months since the report of the discovery, I have endeavored to familiarize myself with the academic literature on the long-term movements of glaciers in the immediate area of Mount Everest. Absent any disclosure from National Geographic, our assumptions on these movements are critical to an understanding of where the discovery was made, and thereby of when Irvine's body or remains fell to the glacier. Firstly, I attempted to narrow down the location of the discovery. In this respect, I had three sources. The first was the single photograph published in National Geographic magazine, in particular the reflected image in the team leader's sunglasses. The second was correspondence with veterans of Everest expeditions, who kindly shared their subjective views on where the published photo had been taken. The third was applications such as Peak Finder and Peak Visor, which reproduced the view from any specified location in any specified direction. Long story short, my best estimate is that the discovery was made on the medial moraine of the glacier, about 6,500 meters from the head of the glacier and thereby from the foot of the northern couloir. Next, I attempted to reverse engineer a trajectory from Mount Everest that was consistent with the presumed location of the discovery. Here, the National Geographic team had thrown a curveball to the effect that the discovery had been preceded and somehow inspired by their finding an oxygen cylinder from 1933, which could have no bearing on Irvine's fall. In my understanding, which glaciologists may correct, objects falling to the head of the glacier are likely to be funneled inwards towards the central flow line. So I concluded, for the moment, that the location of Irvine's remains was consistent with either a fall along the northern couloir or one from the Mallory Basin to the east of the couloir. Finally, I attempted a hypothesis about the time period for Irvine's journey. I assembled data from NASA's It's Live portal, which I understand to represent surface ice velocities as measured by satellite images. I selected several points at 1 kilometer intervals from the head of the glacier as far as the discovery point. The data were enormously variable over time within any given year, as well as from year to year, and to a lesser extent depending on the selected point within the glacier. As a gross simplification, I calculated annual averages for all data points in each year, irrespective of the interval of measurement. Long story short, I found a rather weak but significant correlation between annual average velocities on the glacier and the average summer temperatures at Tingri weather station. I attempted a broad reconstruction of velocities from 1924 to 1986. Given the extreme variability of the data, as far as I could tell, the discovery was consistent either with a fall in 1924 or a fall after 1960. Final disclaimer, I have not yet attempted any modeling of reanalysis datasets. I have not studied these datasets in sufficient depth. I will conclude with my current thoughts regarding the mystery of Mallory and Irvine. If we do not accept Odell's sighting, all bets are off. If we do accept it, it follows that Mallory and Irvine were on the summit pyramid at 12:50 p.m. on June 8, 1924. I have argued that they surmounted the third step. Modern climbers know that from that point there is no substantive obstacle in the way of the summit. On that day, at achievable speeds of ascent and descent, there was enough daylight to reach the summit and to return to their high camp, possibly even to Camp 5. Something went wrong and led to catastrophe. What happened, we do not yet know. A last thought. In 2023, I visited the Royal Geographical Society and viewed the boots that Mallory had been wearing when he died. I have suggested to the Society that on or embedded in the boots, with appropriate imaging technology, they could still find particles of rock. Those particles could tell a story of where Mallory had been before he died. Thank you.